The day Maya told me she just didn't feel the same way anymore, it felt like my world was detonated. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, and countless promises, all erased in a single, hollow confession. She insisted there was no one else, that we'd simply drifted apart over time. But I knew better. There was something deeper, something insidious lurking behind those cold, dismissive words. And I was about to uncover exactly what. Maya had always been ambitious, striving hard in her role as a financial manager at a prominent firm. Over the years, I'd seen her grow in both status and confidence, her ambitions stretching far beyond what I'd expected. But in recent months, her late nights and business trips had turned from the occasional inconvenience to a pattern. At first, I didn't question her explanations. After all, we'd built a life together on trust. But the seed of doubt planted itself firmly in my mind that night as I watched her retreat from our conversation, her eyes avoiding mine. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong it was yet. 2 weeks later, a surprising twist of fate handed me the proof I needed. An old college friend forwarded me an article from a local financial magazine. The headline? Power couple conquers corporate finance. Eric Hughes and Maya Caldwell's rise to the top. I froze. Eric Hughes, a former friend, now her colleague. And, apparently, something much more. There was a picture of them together at a swanky charity gala, looking like the picture-perfect couple I thought we once were. She was beaming, her arm looped through his in a way that felt more familiar than friendly. I couldn't unsee it. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started digging, gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Every whispered phone call, every hurried client dinner. It all painted a picture I wished I didn't have to face. She had stripped me of the family I'd fought to build. But if she thought she could leave me shattered and in the dark, she was mistaken. Now, my focus shifted. I would give her what she wanted, freedom, but on my terms, in a way she'd never forget. With each passing day, the bitterness in my chest grew sharper. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the lies, the deception woven seamlessly into our lives. She had the audacity to carry on with Eric right under my nose, painting a facade of contentment while she dismantled everything we'd built together. The image of them laughing together at that charity event became a scar I carried, a constant reminder of her deceit. But I kept my cool. Every evening, I'd sit at the dinner table, exchanging small talk with Maya as if nothing had changed. Every morning, I'd kiss our kids goodbye, fighting the urge to protect them from a truth that would destroy their innocence. I'd play the dutiful husband, just as she expected, all the while devising a plan to make her pay. It wasn't long before my patience was rewarded with more than I'd bargained for. Maya's birthday was coming up, and I overheard her on the phone with Eric, whispering plans for a weekend getaway. She thought I'd be too oblivious to notice, or perhaps she just didn't care anymore. She assured him she'd make up some excuse for me, that I'd be too preoccupied with work to question her. Hearing her laugh about it, as if I were some fool, ignited a fury I hadn't felt in years. Fine. Let her think I was the naive, distracted husband. This time, I would play my part, just not the way she expected. In the days leading up to her business trip, I meticulously documented everything. Her text messages left on her synced laptop, her itinerary, all the little details she'd grown careless with. I was no fool, and I'd make sure every bit of her betrayal was preserved. Then, with one last piece of resolve, I decided it was time to turn the tables. The night before she left, I put on the most genuine smile I could muster. How about a little early birthday celebration? I suggested, handing her a gift-wrapped box. She looked at me with mild suspicion, her eyes flickering with surprise before she forced a smile. You didn't have to do this. Of course I did. 15 years is worth celebrating, don't you think? As she unwrapped the box, I felt a pang of satisfaction. Inside was a small charm bracelet with tiny engraved letters spelling out each of our kids' names. She looked up, forcing a tear of gratitude. It's beautiful. I smiled, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. Only the best for you, Maya. She took my face in her hands, murmuring an insincere thank you, and kissed me softly. If only she knew that this charm bracelet would be her last gift from me, a keepsake of the life she'd so willingly destroyed. The morning of her business trip arrived. I watched Maya pack her suitcase with that feigned look of concentration, as if she were truly off to some serious work engagement. She threw in a cocktail dress, something she hadn't worn in years, along with heels too fancy for any corporate event. Her eyes met mine briefly, gauging my reaction, but I held my expression steady, offering only a casual, "Safe travels, babe." As she left, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Little did she know that I was 2 steps ahead of her. I'd already booked a room at the same hotel she was staying at with Eric. I had no intention of confronting her right away. That would be too easy, too simple. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to believe her charade was unbreakable. Once she left, I packed my own bag, just enough for a weekend, and headed toward the hotel. The drive was filled with a mix of anger and nervous anticipation. Part of me wondered if I'd chicken out, but the memory of her laughing with Eric at that gala erased any doubt. No, I was done playing the clueless husband. I was going to let her own lies unravel her world. I checked into a room a floor above theirs, under a different name. With my phone and a small recording device, I was ready to gather every bit of proof I needed. I even managed to catch a glimpse of her as she arrived at the lobby, arm in arm with Eric, both of them laughing like 2 giddy teenagers. Watching her, knowing I was right there within reach, filled me with a sickening sense of thrill. They headed up to their suite, oblivious to the fact that their entire weekend would be under surveillance. I waited patiently, breathing deeply, calming myself. Rushing this would ruin the plan, and this weekend was only the beginning. Once they were settled, I left my room, slipping out and following the hallway toward the elevator bank. A quick call to the front desk, a hint of urgency in my voice, and I had a copy of their room key. Lost my wife's key, I told the concierge with a smile. She always forgets her things. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. Back in my room, I reviewed my plan. I'd wait until late that night, until I knew they'd be deep into their evening. Then I'd slip in, leave a few carefully planted surprises, and disappear. The satisfaction of watching Maya realize how far I'd gone to uncover her deceit was all I needed to keep my calm. As midnight approached, I took one last look in the mirror. No anger in my face, no trembling hands, just cold resolve. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about making her feel every ounce of betrayal I'd felt, and more. I slid the key card into their door, feeling a surge of adrenaline as I entered their suite quietly. The dim lighting revealed their intertwined silhouettes on the bed. I took in the scene for just a moment, memorizing the betrayal, then slipped my little surprises into her suitcase. A few incriminating photographs of us as a family, her wedding ring, forgotten, at home, and a small envelope labeled "Happy Anniversary, Love." I wanted her to find it all when she least expected it, like a ghost that would haunt her every step. Stepping out as silently as I came, I left, knowing that my plan was in motion and her world was about to crumble. The next morning, I checked out early, leaving no trace of my stay. I drove home with an eerie calm, feeling as if a weight had lifted. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control, like I held the reins to a story she thought she was directing. Later that evening, as planned, Maya called. I let the phone ring a few times before answering, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, babe," I said, doing my best to sound sleepy. "Hey," she replied, her tone smooth as silk. "I just wanted to check in. The seminar's going well, but it's been exhausting. I can't wait to be home." "Oh yeah?" I asked, forcing a yawn. "Sounds intense." She continued, adding in details about her workshop, the breakout sessions, and how she'd barely had time to eat. Her words, carefully woven, were almost convincing. Almost. I played along, pretending to be concerned about her exhausting schedule. Little did she know, I'd already seen the real schedule, a weekend of wine, luxury, and laughter with Eric. Once we ended the call, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and excitement. Part of me wanted to call her out right then, to throw it in her face and hear her scramble for excuses. But I knew patience was my greatest ally. The trap had to be perfect. When she returned home a day later, I was waiting. I greeted her at the door, playing the role of the oblivious husband. She smiled, gave me a peck on the cheek, and started unpacking. I watched her expression closely as she unzipped her suitcase. Her hand froze as she pulled out the envelope I'd planted. "What's this?" she asked, her face a mask of confusion. I shrugged, feigning ignorance. She carefully opened it, pulling out a single photograph of our family from a beach vacation years ago. The sight of our children's smiling faces seemed to hit her like a punch. She looked at me, searching my eyes, but I held her gaze steadily, betraying nothing. "Oh, I must have left that in there ages ago," I said casually, watching her struggle to believe me. I could see the gears turning in her mind, suspicion starting to flicker behind her carefully controlled expression. "Didn't even realize it was still in there," I added. "Right," she replied, her voice tinged with unease. For the first time, her mask slipped, and I caught a glimpse of guilt. Over the next few days, I let the tension simmer. She started acting more paranoid, double-checking her phone and watching me out of the corner of her eye. It was clear she was waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering if I knew more than I was letting on. I kept up my usual routine, acting as if nothing had changed, letting her drown in her own anxieties. The day before our anniversary, I decided to up the ante. I sent her a single text message while she was at work, one that would remind her just how close I was to her secrets. Asterisk, "Happy early anniversary. Let's make it unforgettable." Asterisk, I could almost picture the look on her face as she read it, panic flashing across her eyes as she questioned whether I'd discovered everything. By the time she came home that evening, I was ready for the final act. This would be the night that tore down every lie she constructed. She walked in, clearly rattled. Her usual confident stride was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost cautious step as she crossed the threshold. Her eyes darted around the room, like she was searching for something amiss. I could see the unease in her expression, the crack in her facade growing wider. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. I could tell she was picking up on the subtle change in my tone, a hint of something that wasn't quite right. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just tired," she murmured, brushing past me. "Long day at work." I nodded, watching her retreat into the kitchen. Her fingers drummed nervously against the countertop as she made a drink, her mind clearly racing. I let the silence build, each passing second adding to her tension, until she finally turned back to me with a forced cheerfulness. "So, any plans for tomorrow?" she asked, trying to act casual. Tomorrow was our anniversary, but she seemed to be testing the waters, likely wondering if I'd planned something special or, worse, if I'd found something that would make the day unforgettable, just like I'd hinted. "Actually, yes," I replied, watching her closely. "I've planned a surprise." The color drained from her face for a split second before she caught herself, her forced smile reappearing. "Oh, really? You know I love surprises." "Good," I said with a grin. "I think this one will be memorable." I let the tension hang in the air, then turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her to stew. I knew she'd be spending the night wrestling with her guilt, wondering just how much I knew, and fearing what the next day would bring. It was the perfect setup, a stage for the truth to unfold in a way she'd never see coming. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling more energized than I had in weeks. Today was the day. I went about my usual routine, acting as though everything was completely normal. She, on the other hand, was jittery, glancing at her phone every few minutes and avoiding eye contact with me. At noon, I told her to meet me for lunch at a small cafe downtown, one we'd visited countless times over the years. She nodded, feigning excitement, but I could tell she was on edge. Before I left, I made sure to grab a small manila envelope from my office, the final piece to this twisted puzzle. As I sat waiting at the cafe, I watched the door, my heart pounding with anticipation. I knew she'd arrive, her curiosity mixed with dread about what I might reveal. When she finally walked in, she spotted me right away and forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. She slid into the seat across from me, fiddling with her wedding ring as she avoided my gaze. I let a silence settle between us, watching her squirm, then slid the manila envelope across the table toward her. She hesitated, her eyes locked on the envelope as if it might explode. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Open it," I replied calmly. "Consider it my anniversary gift to you." With shaking hands, she opened the envelope and pulled out a series of photos. Photos of her and Eric at the hotel, smiling and oblivious, caught in moments that spoke louder than any words could. Her face went pale as she took in each image, her eyes widening in horror as the reality of her exposure settled in. "Maya," I began, keeping my tone steady, "I trusted you. For 15 years, I believed in us. And this is how you repay me?" She looked up, her face a mask of desperation. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "I can explain." But her excuses died in her throat. She knew as well as I did that there was no explaining this, no justifying the betrayal that had ripped through every promise she'd ever made. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I watched her struggle to find words. The power had shifted, and for the first time, I could see the weight of her guilt crashing down on her. "This is just the beginning, Maya," I said quietly. "Happy anniversary." Her face crumpled as she fumbled with the photos, her mind visibly racing for any plausible excuse, any way to salvage the situation. But I'd made sure she had no way out, no lifeline to grasp. Each photo, taken from different angles, showed her laughing, holding his hand, and sharing stolen glances with Eric. Unmistakable evidence that left no room for her usual deflections. "Maya," I said, my voice even, though I felt anything but calm inside, "I want to hear it from you. Tell me why you did it. Why you thought you could rip apart everything we built like it was nothing." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "It's complicated," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never meant for things to get this far." "Oh, I see," I replied, a bitter edge to my tone. "So, it just happened, right? Somehow, you tripped and fell into an affair with my former friend. Very complicated." She flinched at my sarcasm, her shoulders sagging as she finally looked me in the eye. "We drifted, Nick. You were so busy with work, and I just felt alone. Eric was there, and it just happened." I almost laughed at the predictability of her excuse. "So, because I worked hard to support us, to give us a life where you didn't have to worry about a thing, that makes it okay?" "No, I'm not saying that," she muttered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know I messed up, Nick, but please, don't let it end like this. We have the kids, and I still love you. I can make this right, I swear." Her words, dripping with desperation, felt like poison. The audacity to ask me for forgiveness after months, maybe years, of deception made my skin crawl. But I kept my face impassive, refusing to give her any glimpse of what was raging inside me. "Love?" I scoffed. "You don't know the first thing about love, Maya. Real love doesn't betray, doesn't sneak around and lie. Real love is honest, no matter how hard it gets." I leaned forward, my gaze piercing. "But you made your choice. And now, it's my turn to make mine." Her face contorted in a mix of fear and confusion, sensing that something darker, something irrevocable, was unfolding. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Let's talk about the kids," I continued, my voice low. "I'll be moving out temporarily, but we're going to work out an arrangement. I'm taking full custody. You can have visitation rights, but you won't be poisoning their minds with lies or using them as bargaining chips." She gasped, visibly shaken. "Nick, you can't do that. You can't just take them from me." "I can, and I will. I have evidence of your infidelity, Maya. Don't think for a second that the courts won't take that into account. You're the one who chose this path. You're the one who decided to shatter our family for a fling. I won't let you drag them through your mess." She sat there, stunned into silence, her face drained of all color. The reality of the consequences was finally settling in, and there was nothing she could do to undo the damage. "But Nick," she stammered, her voice a fragile whisper, "please, I don't want to lose you, or the kids. I'll do anything to fix this. Please." For a moment, I felt a pang of something, not forgiveness, but a hollow ache for the years I'd invested in her, in us, for the life I thought we'd shared. But that feeling vanished as quickly as it came, leaving only cold resolve. This isn't something you can fix, Maya, I said, my voice unwavering. And I won't spend another day pretending that it is. I'll be staying with a friend until the custody arrangements are finalized. You can have the house, but don't expect me to go down without a fight. As I stood to leave, she reached out, her hand grazing mine, but I pulled away. Goodbye, Maya. And if you ever really cared about us, you'll let me do what's right for the kids. I walked out of that cafe with a weight lifted from my shoulders. This was only the beginning of her reckoning, and she was finally starting to understand the depth of the mistake she'd made. As I stepped out of the cafe, I felt the brisk air hit my face, a stark reminder that I was finally free. I had been bound by her lies for too long, each one tightening like a noose around my neck. But now, I was ready to move forward on my terms. The thought of our kids fueled me, giving me the strength to put one foot in front of the other and not look back. That night, I stayed with my old college buddy, Scott. He'd been my confidant since the early days, and I knew he'd have my back, no questions asked. The moment he opened the door and saw the look on my face, he just nodded, stepping aside to let me in. "Let me guess," he said, pouring 2 stiff drinks as I settled onto his couch. "It's Maya, isn't it?" I nodded, taking a deep breath before relaying everything. The affair, the lies, the photos, the confrontation. He listened, his face set in a grim expression, his silence offering the support I hadn't realized I needed. When I finished, he handed me the drink with a firm look. "Nick, you deserve better. And if there's one thing I know, it's that you're going to come out of this stronger than ever." She just unleashed something in you that can't be put back. I raised my glass, grateful for his words. "To moving forward," I murmured, clinking our glasses together. I downed the drink, feeling the warmth spread through me, burning away the bitterness that had settled in my chest. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings with a lawyer, and spending as much time as possible with our kids. They were too young to understand the full picture, but they could sense the tension. They noticed the absence of our usual routines, of me not sleeping in the same house. Their questions were heartbreaking, each one a painful reminder of the life Maya had so selfishly shattered. I spent my days planning, consulting with my lawyer, making sure every detail was perfect. Maya tried reaching out, her messages ranging from apologies to pleas, but I ignored everyone. She had made her choice, and now she was going to live with it. On the 3rd day, I received a call from Maya, her voice fraught with desperation. "Nick, can we please just sit down and talk? One last time." I didn't trust her intentions, but something told me I needed to see this through. A clean break required finality, a line in the sand. I agreed, setting up a time to meet at our lawyer's office the next afternoon. When I arrived, she was already there, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the confident, put-together woman I had once admired. She looked lost, but I couldn't let myself be drawn back in. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever last-ditch attempt she had up her sleeve. The lawyer nodded at us both, encouraging her to speak first. Maya took a shaky breath, looking at me with a mix of regret and desperation. "Nick, I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't lose our family. I'm willing to go to counseling, to do whatever it takes to make things right." I listened, arms crossed, feeling a wave of déjà vu. I'd heard this story before, the empty promises, the pleas for another chance. But this time, it felt hollow, like a script she'd rehearsed. "Maya, I've heard this all before," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "You want to make things right? Start by being honest with me, with yourself, and with our kids. You owe them that much." Her eyes dropped, and I could tell the weight of her actions was finally crashing down on her. She swallowed, nodding slowly, but I could see that she knew. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was the beginning of her consequences. I rose, extending my hand to shake hers. "We'll keep this civil for the kids' sake. But we're done, Maya. This is goodbye." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears, but there was no going back. I walked out, leaving her with the silence of her choices echoing around her. And just like that, I was free. Leaving Maya in that office felt like shedding the last remnants of the life we had once shared. For so long, I'd clung to memories of our good times, believing they could outweigh her betrayal. But walking out, I realized those memories were just illusions I'd held on to, desperate to preserve a family that was never really there. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Asterisk, we'll finalize the custody agreement by end of week. Let me know if you'd like to make any adjustments. Asterisk. I texted back a quick, thank you, feeling a surge of relief. I'd spent days working with him on a custody arrangement that would protect the kids from as much of this fallout as possible. It was one thing to walk away from Maya, but I would never abandon my children. They were the one pure thing that had come out of all this, and I intended to be there for them, no matter what. The first night back at Scott's place, I finally allowed myself to breathe, to let the reality sink in. The anger, the betrayal, the exhaustion. All of it flooded through me, leaving me feeling both raw and strangely renewed. I was stepping into uncharted territory, and though the road ahead looked rough, it was my road now. No lies, no secrets. Just me, finding my footing. Scott had been a constant support, lending a sympathetic ear whenever I needed it. But he was more than just a friend. He was family. Over beers that night, we talked about everything, from the betrayal to my plans moving forward. So, what's next for you? He asked, his eyes holding that familiar spark of mischief. Are you planning on exacting some epic revenge, or are you going to just let her stew in her own mess? I thought about it, letting his words sink in. Revenge had been the only thing driving me forward these past weeks, the fuel that kept me going through every twist and turn. But as I sat there, contemplating what that might look like, I realized something profound. You know, Scott, I thought about it, I admitted, taking a long sip of my beer. I thought about ruining her life the way she tried to ruin mine. But what good would it do? She's already paying the price, and she'll keep paying it. She's the one who has to live with herself, with the mess she made. Scott nodded, raising his bottle in a silent toast. To moving on, then. To moving on, I echoed, clinking bottles with him. And in that moment, I felt a strange peace settle over me. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, and maybe I never would be. But it was acceptance, the realization that sometimes, the best revenge was letting someone live with the consequences of their actions. Over the next few days, I started laying the groundwork for my new life. I reached out to my boss about taking on more projects, something to keep me occupied and focused. I looked into therapy, knowing that facing all this alone would only take me so far. And, most importantly, I spent time with the kids, rebuilding routines and reassuring them that, despite everything, they still had a family. Then, one afternoon, as I was wrapping up a work call, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, asterisk, from Eric. Asterisk. I froze, feeling a jolt of shock. Eric, the man who had been the catalyst for all of this, the man who had slipped into my life, uninvited, and left chaos in his wake. Curiosity and anger mingled as I opened the email, my mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. What could he possibly have to say? The message was short, almost clinical. Asterisk, Nick, I know you have every reason to hate me, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I felt you deserve the truth. There are things about Maya's actions that you don't know, things I think you should understand. If you're willing, meet me. I'll tell you everything. Asterisk. My hands clenched around the phone, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to delete the email, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But another part, the part that needed closure, couldn't let it go. If there was more to the story, if there were answers to questions I hadn't even asked yet, maybe it was time to face them. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for the final piece of the puzzle. I stared at the email, rereading Eric's words until they were etched into my mind. My gut twisted at the thought of meeting him, of sitting across from the man who had broken apart my marriage. Yet something kept pulling me back to that final line. Asterisk, I'll tell you everything. Asterisk. There was something about the tone, a heaviness, a sense of unfinished business that unsettled me. I'd already thought I knew everything there was to know, that I'd uncovered the truth behind Maya's betrayal. But Eric's message hinted at something more, a layer I hadn't peeled back. I needed closure, and if this meeting was the key, then I couldn't walk away from it. I replied with a brief message, tomorrow, noon, at Emerson's Cafe. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Scott noticed my distraction and didn't press for details, though he offered me a supportive pat on the back as we parted ways for the night. I barely slept, my mind racing through all the possible revelations Eric might bring to the table. Whatever he had to say, I had to brace myself. The next day, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early. I picked a table in the corner, where I could observe without being too conspicuous. I sat with my back to the wall, hands clenched tightly around my coffee cup as I watched the door. At exactly noon, Eric walked in. He scanned the room and spotted me, his face tightening slightly. He approached cautiously, as if he were the one who had something to fear. Good, I thought. He should feel uncomfortable. Nick, he greeted, nodding as he took the seat across from me. He looked more worn than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his expression less smug. I studied him in silence, refusing to offer any small talk. I wanted to know why he was here, and I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Finally, he took a deep breath, meeting my gaze. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, and I don't blame you. I don't expect forgiveness or even understanding, but I felt like you needed to know. There's more to this than just an affair. I arched an eyebrow, skepticism filling my voice. More to it? You mean, beyond you sneaking around with my wife behind my back? Eric flinched, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. He swallowed, nodding slowly. Yeah, beyond that. I didn't come here to make excuses for myself. I crossed a line, and I know that. But there's something you need to know about Maya, something she never told you. A chill ran down my spine, but I kept my face neutral. Go on. Eric hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Maya, she's not who you think she is. She's been lying, not just about me, but about other things too. I don't know how much you know, but I think you should hear it from me. I gritted my teeth, my patience wearing thin. Eric, I don't need your riddles. Just spit it out. He nodded, taking a steadying breath. When we first started working together, she told me about some issues she was having with you. Things she claimed you didn't understand. She played the victim, made me believe that you were distant, that you didn't care. She painted this picture of a miserable marriage, and at first, I believed her. I felt a hot surge of anger. Maya had twisted the story to make me out as the villain, setting the stage for her betrayal. But I kept my face impassive, motioning for him to continue. I know it doesn't excuse what I did, but I want you to know. She's been seeing other people before me, Nick. I wasn't the first, and I don't think I was the last. His words hit me like a blow. I'd suspected that her affair with him wasn't an isolated incident, but hearing it confirmed was another matter. I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my voice steady. How many? I asked coldly. He looked down, shame crossing his face. I don't know. She didn't tell me specifics, but I know there were at least 2 others. She has this need for validation, for attention. It's like she's always looking for something more, something no one can give her. I fell for it, thinking I was different. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the walls of my mind crumbling, the carefully constructed illusion I'd clung to splintering into dust. Maya had built her own reality, one where she was the perpetual victim, justified in every act of betrayal. Eric looked up, meeting my gaze with a grim determination. I didn't come here to absolve myself, Nick. I know what I did was wrong, and I've lost a lot because of it. But I didn't want you to think it was only about me. Maya has her own demons, and I think you deserve to know the truth. I took a slow breath, letting his words sink in. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Maya, was unraveling. But for the first time, I felt free from the weight of her lies. She was broken in ways I couldn't fix, flaws that ran deeper than our marriage could ever repair. Thank you, I said finally, my voice cold but sincere. Now I know the full story. He nodded, looking like he wanted to say more but thought better of it. He rose, casting me a final, remorseful look. Good luck, Nick. I hope you find peace. As he left, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth, as brutal as it was, had set me free. Now, I could finally start to rebuild, knowing that the chains of her lies could no longer bind me. As I sat alone in the cafe, letting Eric's words settle, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. For the first time, I saw Maya for who she truly was, a woman consumed by insecurities, desperately seeking validation in the worst possible ways. Knowing that she'd spun a web of lies not just around me, but around others as well, was oddly liberating. I realized that none of this was my fault. I'd been caught in her storm, but now I was free to walk away. I drove back to Scott's place in a daze, 1,000 thoughts colliding in my mind. For weeks, I'd been bracing myself for the fallout, letting anger and hurt dictate my every move. But now, I felt as though a weight had been lifted, replaced by a steely resolve. It was time to turn the page. That night, as Scott and I sat on his back porch, nursing beers under the stars, I filled him in on the conversation with Eric. Scott listened quietly, his brow furrowing as he took in the details. "Wow," he said finally, shaking his head. "I knew she was a piece of work, but I didn't realize it ran that deep. You're better off without her, Nick." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality in those words. "Yeah, I think I'm finally ready to let it go." Scott grinned, raising his beer. "Here's to new beginnings, my friend." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. The next morning, I began making plans. I knew that for me to truly move forward, I needed to rebuild my life from the ground up. I reached out to my boss and requested more work hours, throwing myself into projects that would keep me busy and distracted. I also signed up for therapy, knowing that untangling the trauma of betrayal would be a process that required guidance. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I was sleeping better, feeling more focused, and the anxiety that had been my constant companion started to fade. I was no longer haunted by memories of Maya or the future we'd once planned. Instead, I was focusing on the present, on becoming the best father I could be for my kids, and on building a life that I could be proud of. One evening, as I was reviewing some paperwork, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something urged me to pick up. "Hello?" I answered, a bit wary. "Nick, it's Maya." Her voice was soft, hesitant, almost unrecognizable. I felt a surge of irritation, wondering what she could possibly want. "What do you need, Maya?" She hesitated, and I could hear the faint tremor in her voice. I wanted to apologize. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo, but I wanted you to know that I'm going to get help. I need to understand why I did what I did, why I sabotaged everything." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me felt relieved that she was taking responsibility, but another part of me couldn't forget the damage she'd caused. "That's probably a good idea, Maya," I said finally, keeping my tone measured. "But I hope you're not looking for forgiveness, because I don't think I can give that to you." There was a pause, then a small sigh. "I understand. I don't deserve it. But I wanted to tell you that. If there's any way I can make things easier for you and the kids, I'll do it." I took a deep breath, surprised by the sincerity in her tone. "The best thing you can do is focus on yourself and stay consistent for the kids. They need stability, and that's the least we can give them." She murmured a quiet agreement, then added, "Thank you, Nick, for everything. I hope someday you find happiness again." I ended the call, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. Maya's words didn't erase what she had done, but they felt like the final note in a song I was ready to leave behind. For the first time, I could see a future where she didn't haunt my thoughts, where I was truly free. Over the next few months, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I found a new apartment, set up a comfortable space for the kids, and reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I even started going to a local gym, focusing on my health and well-being, and allowing myself to feel optimistic about the future. Then, one day, as I was grabbing a coffee at a nearby shop, I saw a familiar face across the room. It was Laura, an old friend from college. We'd lost touch over the years, but seeing her now brought back memories of simpler times. "Nick," she called out, her face lighting up as she approached. "Is that really you?" I grinned, feeling an unexpected surge of warmth. "Laura, wow. It's been ages. We spent the next hour catching up, talking about everything from old memories to the new chapters we were each navigating. As I sat there, laughing and reminiscing, I realized something profound. I was ready to move on. I was ready to open myself up to new possibilities, to let go of the bitterness that had once held me captive. As Laura and I exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch, I felt a spark of hope. The past was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. Days passed, and slowly, life began to feel normal again. I settled into my routine, balancing work with time spent with the kids and reconnecting with old friends. I even began to look forward to my sessions at the gym, feeling my strength return both physically and mentally. Every step forward felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was more than the scars left behind by Maya's betrayal. True to her word, Maya stayed consistent with the kids, and while we were cordial during handoffs, I kept our interactions brief and formal. She appeared remorseful, and perhaps she truly was. But I'd learned to keep my guard up, refusing to be drawn back into the emotional quicksand of our past. Laura and I started meeting more often. We'd grab coffee, go on hikes, or just chat about life, catching up on the years we'd missed. She had a warmth and genuine kindness about her that felt like a balm, soothing the parts of me that were still healing. It wasn't romantic, not yet, anyway, but it was something else equally precious. It was friendship. One evening, as we sat at a local bar after a long week, Laura asked me something I hadn't expected. "Nick, do you ever think about, dating again?" I chuckled, a bit caught off guard. "You mean after everything?" "I don't know. I guess I haven't thought much about it." She tilted her head, giving me a knowing smile. "I think you've done a lot of work on yourself, and you deserve to find someone who sees that." Her words stayed with me long after our evening ended. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to consider what a new chapter could look like, to let myself hope for something beyond the routine of work, kids, and the remnants of a shattered marriage. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I realized that, for the first time, I didn't feel weighed down by the past. I didn't feel the sting of betrayal or the bitterness that had once kept me up at night. I felt free. I'd done the work, rebuilt myself piece by piece, and now I was finally ready to move forward. A few weeks passed, and one evening, as I was scrolling through old photos of the kids on my phone, an email notification popped up. It was from an unfamiliar sender, but the subject line caught my attention. Asterisk, a final note from Maya. Asterisk. I hesitated, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Part of me wanted to delete it without a second thought, to avoid reopening wounds that had just started to heal. But another part of me knew that if this was truly Maya's final attempt to communicate, then perhaps I needed to hear it. With a deep breath, I opened the email. It was short, almost painfully so. "Nick, asterisk, I know I don't deserve another moment of your time, and I promise this is my last attempt to reach out. I've spent these past months trying to understand my actions, to come to terms with the person I became. I know I've lost your trust, your love, and any chance at forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond or to even read this. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry. Asterisk, I know you'll find someone who will give you the love and loyalty you always deserved, and I hope someday you can find peace. Asterisk, take care, Maya." Asterisk. I sat there, staring at the words, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. It wasn't that her apology erased the pain or magically healed the wounds, but it felt like a fitting end to a chapter I'd been ready to close. Maya had finally owned up to the damage she'd caused, and while it wouldn't undo anything, it offered a sense of finality. For the first time, I allowed myself to forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine. I could move forward without resentment, without bitterness. I could finally let go. The next day, I went about my routine with a newfound lightness, and as I picked up the kids that evening, we laughed and joked, filling the car with their chatter and laughter. I realized I was no longer just surviving. I was living, truly living, with nothing holding me back. Life had handed me a fresh start, and I was ready to embrace it. The weeks following Maya's email felt like a turning point. I had expected that reading her words might dredge up old feelings, but instead, It felt like the final door closing on a past I no longer needed to carry. I was free, really genuinely free. I had faced every ugly truth, every bitter emotion, and walked through it. Now, all that was left was the open road ahead. Laura and I continued to see each other, our friendship deepening in ways that felt both effortless and meaningful. One Saturday, as we were hiking through a forest trail, Laura paused, turning to me with a thoughtful expression. "Nick," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking. You're a good man, and you deserve happiness, real happiness. Do you think we could be part of that happiness for each other?" Her words hung in the air, a quiet question that carried a weight I wasn't sure I was ready for. But as I looked at her, seeing the warmth and sincerity in her eyes, I realized that my heart was ready. Slowly, carefully, I nodded. "I'd like that," I replied, smiling. "More than you know." Over the next few months, Laura and I transitioned from close friends to something deeper. It was a slow, thoughtful progression, one built on mutual respect and understanding. She knew my story, the scars I carried, and I knew hers. We weren't rushing into anything. Instead, we were savoring each step, building something real, something neither of us needed to hide from. One evening, as we sat on her porch, sipping wine under the stars, she took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Nick, you know I'll always be here for you. Whatever comes, whatever you need." I squeezed her hand back, my heart swelling with gratitude. For so long, I'd wondered if I could ever open myself up to someone again, if I could trust without fear of betrayal. But with Laura, everything felt natural, unforced. She was a steady presence in my life, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. Around this time, Maya reached out about wanting to meet for a family event with the kids. I hesitated at first, unsure of what seeing her again might stir up. But ultimately, I decided it was time to show my kids that even through heartbreak, we could come together for their sake. They didn't need to feel the division between us, and I wanted to set an example of resilience. The day arrived, and I met Maya at the agreed spot, Laura by my side for support. Maya gave Laura a polite, if somewhat strained, smile, and I noticed her gaze linger on the easy connection between us. For a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, a realization of what she had lost. But I brushed it aside, focused on the joy of seeing our kids, on making this day about them. As we watched the kids play together, I felt a strange sense of peace. Maya had once been my whole world, but now, she was simply the mother of my children. Nothing more, nothing less. And with Laura's hand in mine, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, after the kids were tucked in, Laura and I sat on my porch, the quiet night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. She looked at me, her eyes filled with warmth and pride. "You did good today, Nick," she whispered, resting her head on my shoulder. "You handled that with grace." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. "I couldn't have done it without you, Laura. You've been my anchor through all of this." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars above. I realized that while life had thrown its worst at me, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and with someone beside me who saw me for who I truly was. The pain of the past no longer had power over me. Looking ahead, I knew there would still be challenges, moments where doubt might creep in, but I also knew that I was no longer the man I had been. I had grown, healed, and reclaimed my life. And with Laura by my side, the future looked brighter than I ever thought possible. The days turned into months, and Laura and I continued to build a life together, one step at a time. We kept things simple, allowing our relationship to grow naturally without rushing toward anything too quickly. There was a quiet comfort in knowing we didn't need to pretend or put on masks. She knew my story, my struggles, and I knew hers. Our pasts didn't define us. Instead, they had shaped us into the people we were now, ready to embrace the possibilities before us. One afternoon, I found myself standing on the sidelines of my son's soccer game, cheering him on as he raced across the field. Maya was there too, along with Laura, both offering their support from different spots along the field. It was an odd dynamic, one I could never have imagined even a year ago. But somehow, it felt right. We were here for the kids, united in giving them stability and love, even if life hadn't gone as planned. After the game, my son ran over, grinning ear to ear as he showed off his mud-streaked jersey. "Did you see that goal, Dad?" he asked, his eyes bright with excitement. "I sure did, buddy," I replied, ruffling his hair. "That was amazing. I'm proud of you." Laura leaned down, giving him a high five, and I saw the joy in his face as he looked between the two of us. In that moment, I realized just how much this new life, this redefined family, meant to him. He didn't care about the broken pieces of the past. He only saw the love surrounding him now. Maya approached us, and for the first time in a long while, I felt no animosity, no bitterness. She smiled at our son, then looked at me, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Nick," she said softly, nodding toward Laura, "for everything you're doing for them. I know it hasn't been easy, but you're a great father." I nodded, acknowledging her words. "We're all doing our best for them. That's what matters." She offered a small, understanding smile before stepping back to give us space. Laura looked at me, her eyes shining with pride, and reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I felt a surge of warmth, a quiet sense of victory over the shadows that had once haunted me. Maya's words, while unexpected, felt like a final bridge to healing. We had all moved forward, each in our own way, and that chapter of bitterness and betrayal was finally closed. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep and Laura and I were back at my place, I found myself thinking about the future, about the life I wanted to build with her. We had taken things slowly, step by step, but now I felt ready for more. She sensed my thoughts, watching me with that quiet, understanding gaze that had been my anchor through every high and low. "Nick," she whispered, her hand resting on my arm, "you don't have to say anything. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude for this woman who had walked beside me through every storm. "Laura," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "I don't know where we're headed exactly, but I know I want to be with you. You've been my rock, my best friend, and I don't want to imagine a future without you." She reached up, brushing a gentle hand against my cheek. "Then let's build it together, one step at a time. No rush, just us." With that, I leaned in, kissing her softly, feeling a peace and contentment I hadn't known was possible. This was the life I'd fought for, the future I had reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. And with Laura by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. As the months passed, Laura and I continued to weave our lives together, blending routines, sharing milestones, and supporting each other's dreams. We'd both been through our share of hardship, and that mutual understanding brought a deeper bond. Even the kids seemed to thrive with her around. They had taken to calling her Miss Laura at first, but as time went on, their laughter and ease around her felt like a natural extension of our family. One Saturday morning, we decided to take a road trip up the coast with the kids, a chance to escape the daily grind and make memories together. The car was packed with snacks, games, and enough music playlists to get us through hours of winding roads. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the kids laughing in the back seat, swapping stories and teasing each other about who would spot the ocean first. Laura sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, her eyes twinkling with a joy that made my heart swell. We reached a scenic lookout just as the sun was starting to set, casting a golden glow across the horizon. The kids raced to the edge of the viewing area, excitedly pointing out the waves crashing below. I watched Laura as she joined them, laughing as they pretended to be explorers discovering new lands. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for this life we had built, the second chance I had found with her by my side. As we settled into a picnic spot to watch the sunset, my daughter looked at me, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Dad, do you think we'll do this every year? Like a new family tradition?" Her question hit me with a wave of warmth. "Yeah, sweetheart," I replied, glancing at Laura, who gave me a reassuring smile. "I think we just might." The kids cheered, already making plans for future trips, and I felt a peace settle over me, knowing that this was the life I'd fought for, one filled with love, resilience, and a future that felt whole again. Later that night, After the kids had fallen asleep in the cabin we'd rented, Laura and I sat outside under the stars, a quiet blanket wrapped around us. She looked at me with that familiar warmth, the same gaze that had given me strength on my darkest days. "Nick," she murmured, her voice soft and steady. "Do you remember the day we met again, at that coffee shop?" I didn't expect anything more than an afternoon catching up with an old friend. But here we are. You've given me so much more than I ever imagined. I took her hand, holding it tightly, feeling a rush of gratitude for this woman who had helped me rebuild. "And you've given me everything I never knew I could have again. You were there when I needed someone most, and I can't imagine life without you now." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder as we looked up at the stars. "I want this to last, Nick. I want us to keep making these memories, to keep building this life." I tightened my arm around her, feeling the truth in her words echo through me. This was no longer a journey of recovery or survival. It was a journey towards something beautiful, something enduring. We had created a life grounded in trust, love, and a resilience that could withstand anything. Under that vast, starlit sky, I realized that I wasn't just grateful for a second chance. I was grateful for the woman beside me, for the life we were shaping together. I had finally found my way home. The morning sun filtered through the cabin windows, casting a warm glow on the room. As I looked around, the scene before me felt like something out of a dream. The kids were still asleep, nestled comfortably on the couches and armchairs they'd claimed as beds, and Laura was beside me, her hand resting gently on my chest. The past year of transformation and healing had led to this moment, one that felt calm and complete. Later, as we packed up and prepared to head home, I found myself thinking about the future in a way I hadn't dared to before. For the longest time, my thoughts had been filled with doubt, questions of what if and what next. But now, with Laura's steady presence and the renewed laughter of my kids, I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. The drive back was filled with stories from the trip, the kids talking excitedly about everything they'd seen and already planning the next one. Laura laughed along, joining in on their enthusiasm, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe for how naturally she'd fit into our lives. This wasn't just a road trip. It was a new beginning, a fresh canvas for all of us. As we pulled up to my house, the kids ran inside, eager to recount their adventures. I turned to Laura, taking her hand as she smiled back at me. "Nick," she began, her voice gentle but filled with certainty, "I don't know where this journey will take us, but I know one thing. I'm here for it, all of it." Her words hit me like a revelation. This was real, this was us, and I didn't want to hold back any longer. I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers, feeling that same rush of gratitude and love that had brought us here. "I feel the same way, Laura. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it, and I want it with you." With that, I knew I was closing the chapter on the past, on every betrayal and heartbreak. What lay ahead was ours to create, ours to cherish. And as we walked into the house, hand in hand, I felt the final pieces of my heart fall into place, knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be. This was my second chance, my life, my family, and a love built on trust and resilience. And with Laura by my side, I knew that the journey was only just beginning. Thank you for diving into this journey of resilience and rediscovery. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced a turning point or a second chance that changed everything? Share your story with us. We'd love to hear it. For more stories of resilience and new beginnings, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Your next great story awaits.